The Toei anime made some very interesting changes to the Godvalley incident as we know it, in addition to the entire Kuma flashback, and it's gotten to the point where it's no longer enough to just watch the anime or just read the manga, as both are conveying important information seemingly exclusive to their respective mediums. Ever since the return of the One Piece anime, I've been paying a lot more attention to it than usual, because we have a new series director for the first time since Wano began, and pretty significant changes are being made. Some for the better, others for worse, and some that are so impactful that it even recontextualizes the manga. And I have to say that episode 1129 is a bit of a masterclass in how anime changes can very much enhance the manga. In particular, there's this beautiful moment of Bonnie remembering Kuma while she's being held by Saturn, which is this lovely drawn pastel sequence of Bonnie and Kuma doing the Nika dance, which is a phenomenal artistic choice to show us an event from the perspective of Jewelry Bonnie, who is a child. It's like asking a young child in school to draw a picture of their family with crayons and stuff. Something that makes the parent feel all warm and proud and want to stick to the fridge. And I think that the One Piece anime really excels when it takes stylistic risks like this, because this is something that the manga cannot do. Oda can't just break out the pastels and charcoal and start drawing in a completely new medium. And the best part about this sequence is right at the end. There's a close-up of Kuma's face, and it is by far the most detailed of all the drawings, which is the artistic way of showing us just how important Kuma is to Bonnie. Everything else in her memory is a vague shape, but what really stands out and what is really seared into Bonnie's memory is the loving smile of her father. I should say this flashback does also happen in the manga, but it's drawn in the standard Oda style, and it just doesn't pack the same emotional oomph as the anime does. And this episode also did a lot of extra justice to the Kuma flashback by adding more time with his parents, particularly his father Clap. And the anime takes the time to make it clear that Clap is a priest who lives in the Sorbet Kingdom Church. We didn't find that out until much later in the manga, and I know this doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is. The order in which you find out information can change your impression of that information. Also in the anime, we even see Clap wearing his priest robes, and this is a smack right in the flashback nutsack, because Clap's priest guard is what Kuma's modern day outfit is based on. He's dressing like his father, and in fact Kuma's clerical wear may even be his father's clothes, just altered with the target and the paw pattern. And I think it is such a shame that we don't see this in the manga, because it just gives me a completely different impression of Kuma. Not completely different, but it adds so much to him. Specifically because he only started wearing this outfit after he found Bonnie. So when Kuma became a father, he decided to take on that role by dressing like his father. And it's just the tiniest shot of sweetness, but it's absolute genius from whichever Toei staff member it is who wanted to include it. In addition to that, the anime also makes it very clear that Kuma was born in the chapel, whereas in the manga, it's kind of a vague space. All we had was a blank white background. But I want it noted that in the anime, Kuma was born and held by his parents for the first time in the exact same spot that Kuma would later find and hold Bonnie for the first time. So Kuma became a father in the same spot where his father became a father. And these are all beautiful ideas that I'm sure did exist in the mind brain of Eiichiro Oda, but the speed in which he needs to draw the manga means that a lot of these little pieces of connective tissue just go missing in the process. And that's where the anime can often be very, very useful in slowing things down and picking up these little connections. But for something a lot less beautiful, the Toei anime also extends Kuma's time as a slave in the Holy Land. We see a lot more of his joyous childhood, and in exchange, we also get hit with a lot more of his horrific physical and emotional pain. In particular, there is a scene added that I think anime-only watchers would be aghast wasn't in the manga, which is the part where Kuma's mother is taken away. In the manga, Kuma's mother is just suddenly gone. We cut from her holding Kuma in chains, then to some other horrible things that are happening, and suddenly we've got Clap announcing that his wife is dead. And what's nice, or well, not nice, but what's so hard-hitting about this is it gives you an idea of just how meaningless their lives are to the world nobles. That the person you love most in this world can exist in one panel and then be completely erased by the next. However, in the anime, we do see a filler scene of Kuma's mother's parting words where she says, "Kuma, live your life no matter how hard it gets." And I do really like that we get to see his mother's influence in the anime. She is admittedly a bit of a non-entity in the manga. In fact, she only says a single word, which is Kuma, and only appears for a total of 3 panels. Part of that is again to demonstrate the fleeting and disposable approach to life that the world nobles have, but part of it is also the fact that Eiichiro Oda he doesn't have enough space to draw everything that he wants to. And so I do appreciate that the anime gave Kuma's mother that impact on her son, because no doubt those words have powered Kuma throughout his entire tragic life. But in a bit more of a weird maneuver, this episode gave us young Figgle and Garling's color color scheme. And for all of the great work that the anime is doing, this is a bit of a disaster. The blonde banana hair, that's one thing, that's fine, and it's given us a lot of fun garling banana memes, but whoever chose these colors needs to be thoroughly disciplined for picking chartreuse. Chartreuse is a word that wankers use to describe the meeting point between green and yellow, and it can look quite nice depending on how much of each you put into it, but it can also come out looking like an infant's diarrhea. That is what Garling's breast-only covering jacket looks like, as if baby Shanks had an accident all over it before the native hunting competition began. And it really is like the art team had a bet to see who could come up with the worst color scheme. But this is now our long-awaited window into the Godvalley incident. And in episode 1130, there was an opening flashback where we see an extra scene of Kuma chasing a bird with his parents, and then we replay the events of Kuma's life, but from his perspective. This is a very interesting shot, and it is a complete Kuma POV. So this is a case where technically, yes, this is filler, but it's done quite cleverly and artistically enough that it gives us a different insight into the same events we've already seen. And there's something especially painful about being forced to step into Kuma's shoes here, where seeing events happen to him elicits sympathy, but experiencing those events with him taps more into empathy. Kuma's parents, even after their death, actually continue to linger and play a much larger role in the anime than they did in the manga. Such as when making the decision to be a decoy, there is a brief flashback to Kuma's parents, and when Ivankov calls Kuma's paws the hands of liberation, Kuma also had a flashback to his father's words. And at the end of episode 1130, something I really like is the stylistic choice to mirror all of Ginny and Kuma's scenes together on the Sorbet Kingdom, with flashbacks of Kuma doing the same thing with his parents. Eating, chopping wood, etc., really hammering home that Kuma has found a new family with Ginny. And this was very deliberately done to make it feel even worse when Ginny eventually gets captured by the world nobles. To make it very, very clear that with Ginny, Kuma has reclaimed everything he lost because of the world nobles, only for Kuma to go on and lose his family a second time. And I do think that it's more effective than the way the manga did it. It's just that extra stab in the heart, to raise the audience that much higher before dropping them into the pit of abyss. But we do also need to talk about the Rocks Pirates, and one thing that I found quite unfortunate about the anime adaptation is that in the manga there is this fantastic Rocks Pirates group shot, the biggest group shot we've seen to date, which the anime didn't quite live up to, and part of that is because it omitted 5 members of the Rocks Pirates. Probably most importantly, the anime doesn't show Streusen, who you can see here in the very bottom right of the panel. He is the sociopathic little cookman who found Charlotte Lin and started the Big Mom Pirates with her. And this panel here was confirmation that he was also a member of the Rocks Pirates, so it was definitely a shame not to see him there in the anime. And in addition, there's also 4 currently unknown Rocks Pirates members who were not animated. To be fair, these guys are probably just Rocks Pirates set dressing in the manga from Oda, kind of like what he did with the Roger Pirates, where there's about 20 extra crew members who all have names and unique designs, but we know nothing about them and probably never will. Still, it would have been nice to see them in the anime, because that panel in the manga really gives you a sense of, whoa, this is a large force of infamous pirates. Whereas in the anime, it feels more like a skeleton crew. But also, due to the business model of the anime, it has to move slower than the manga at all times. And because of that, the anime does tend to excel when it gets to flesh out these small manga details, rather than completely remove them. And there is also a 6th Rocks Pirates member that you may or may not have noticed in the anime. It's the very well-rounded head dude right here. He's quite clear in the manga, but in the anime, he's hidden behind Whitebeard and colored quite darkly, so that you wouldn't even notice him if you weren't looking for him. And this episode in particular was pretty highly anticipated, at least by me, because this was the debut of the voice of Roxy Zebek. Here we get 2 whole spoken lines from Mr. Rocks, and I have to say, it was slightly underwhelming. To be fair to the voice actor Shinsu Fuji, he didn't really get much to work with. Rocks at this stage is still being kept completely shrouded in mystery. I don't even know how an actor would go about performing a character that he knows nothing about, but he kind of sounded like a generic old man. And I actually personally mistook Rox's first line for Whitebeard speaking at first. He's definitely lacking that commanding presence of a man who subdued Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido. And his next opportunity to leave an impression of us won't be for a while. We'll be waiting till Elbaf to hear from Rox again, where he does get a bit more to say, but that'll probably be in a year and a half, or maybe even 2 years from now. However, something I found very intriguing about the anime has to do with the Godvalley chest prizes. In the anime, Emporio Ivankov and Bartholomew Kuma, greedy little pricks they are, steal all 6 prize chests instead of just the ones with Kaido's fruit and the pawpaw fruit. Now the manga blasts through all of this very, very quickly. We just see Kuma and Ivankov holding the devil fruits. I don't even see the chests, but this chest business is potentially relevant because it is suspected that one of these 6 chests is where baby Shanks ended up in, which then made its way to Roger's ship. And also, not to be forgotten, the other 4 chests that they took also contain very special prizes. We don't know what those prizes were at the time of this recording, but it's very possible that they were also 4 other extremely powerful and influential devil fruits that we have seen in the series. And look, as far as the Godvalley incident in the anime goes, it was actually extremely lean. In fact, there was very little filler whatsoever. Most of the filler was packed into Kuma related stuff before the incident happened, and as I've said, Godvalley even cut some stuff from the manga. So it was, for the most part, pretty faithful to the manga portrayal of the event. And my guess as to why that is would be because Toei is a bit too timid to take too many liberties with Godvalley, because if they go and add extra scenes with characters like Roger, Rox, Garp, and everyone else who was on the island, then it may end up contradicting future manga revelations by Oda. Because even though we had a whole episode, this was only the briefest of glimpses as to what actually happened on Godvalley. With Kuma though, many liberties are taken, and if I were Kuma, I would start to feel personally attacked by Toei, because almost all of those liberties result in more pain for him. Such as in episode 1131, one of the most striking differences is that Kuma taking away the bubble pain of the elderly is significantly more brutal in the anime than in the manga. In the manga, most of what happened occurred off-page. Oda likes to leave that stuff to the imagination, but in the anime, we see this visceral and disturbing scene of the bubble very slowly shrinking as Kuma absorbs more and more of the pain. And there's also a point at the end where Kuma throws up the entire blood supply of a standard human body. It looks not great. When I say not great, I mean it's a great scene. It's horrifying. It looks not great. I don't want to do it. That's what I mean. But whether this changes for better or worse, I think you can make the argument either way. I do think there is something nice about keeping the horror locked in the imagination, but I also can't deny that seeing exactly what Kuma has to go through in excruciating slow detail makes me respect him a hell of a lot, because we now know exactly what he has to do every Sunday, and knowing that he is more than happy to undergo this pain for the sake of relieving others just makes me give him more thumbs up than I have thumbs. But next up is actually a very cute change that the anime made. While they're eating dinner together, there is a filler scene where Kuma asks if he and Ginny can do something tomorrow, and what they ultimately decide to do is have a barbecue down by the river, which is actually a reference to the cover of chapter 1097, where Oda drew a reader request, which was Kuma catching salmon in the river, and he decided to have Ginny having a barbecue with him. And I really like that the anime added this, because when this chapter came out, one of the things I said is that I wish this river scene was canon, and that we got more moments of Ginny and Kuma living their best life together. Although it is a bit unfortunate that Toei didn't go all out and actually animate this scene, I think that would have been very cute and a great excuse for more filler, but referencing this art request and canonizing it was great. But 1131 had another pretty colossal change. Like in this one, I don't know how I feel about it, but it's the scene where Ginny proposes to Kuma. It is so much longer in the anime than it was in the manga, and it is extremely dramatic. In the manga, this scene is played as more of a gag. Yes, Ginny is serious about the proposal, but it's a lot more wacky, and Ginny takes Kuma's refusal a lot more casually. Sort of as if, oh well, you're a dumbass, I'll ask again tomorrow. However, this scene in the anime is crazy dramatic, with the soap opera style music and Ginny on the verge of bursting into tears, and when Kuma tries to change the subject, Ginny clenches her fist in a very angry manner, and then stands there in complete silence with her eyes stylistically blacked out. There is nothing funny happening here. There is so much emotion and so much tension that definitely was not present in the manga, where again, this whole scene is played off as more of a lighthearted gag, with the exception of us seeing why Kuma refused. And again, I'm honestly not sure how I feel about the change. It is a pretty spot-on reaction to having your marriage proposal rejected, but it does make it seem like there is a lot more tension in this relationship than I think there really was. Now, also in episode 1131, we see the Revolutionary Army straight up murder some people when they invade the Sorbet Kingdom to depose King Bakori. We see 3 soldiers getting shot to death, which is an interesting decision. Realistically, I know that the Revolutionary Army does probably kill people because they're an army and they're at war, but as an author, Eiichiro Oda tends to have a policy of not showing his good guys killing people because it makes them cross a moral boundary that Oda would rather not deal with the repercussions of, which is probably why, say for example, Igaram survived his assassination by the many hands of Nico Robin. It should be said that Robin was the only Straw Hat crew member who wasn't planned from day one, so Miss Olsande was probably created as a villain, and when Oda decided he wanted to have her join the crew, he was like, oh no, I need to retcon that whole murder situation. No, Igaram didn't die. What? That's crazy. So look, it's not a huge deal, and I'm sure it's happened before, but the anime showing our alleged good guy shooting people to death is kind of like showing Batman killing people. It just doesn't seem quite right, even if it is a perfectly reasonable solution in the moment. And this is extremely interesting, but next up, we also see the shadow of the person who abducted Ginny, which we definitely do not see in the manga, and it appears to be shaped like a person wearing a cloak. In addition to that, the legs of her captor are much more defined than in the manga, and what is clear from the anime is that Ginny wasn't spotted by a standard world noble and captured on the spot. It's much more likely that this figure is either a cloaked Holy Knight who was sent to abduct Ginny, or possibly even a Cypherpole member. But I feel like Holy Knight is a bit more likely. If it was a Cypherpole agent, you'd have to assume that it was CP0. They're the only ones that act on behalf of the world nobles directly. But CP0 wear these all white outfits rather than the black pants of this figure, which does make me think that, yeah, maybe it was a Holy Knight, which would imply that Ginny's captor was someone even more high up in the world noble hierarchy than we initially suspected. At this stage, all we know for a fact is that it was not Saint Saturn, or at least Saint Saturn claims not to be the person. So I do look forward to the potential of the anime giving us some more clues to work with, and for now, I do think that overall the anime is doing a pretty great job of adapting the manga in this current era. But you let me know what you think in the comments place below.